All right, today we are diving into a huge story, a decision that sent absolute shockwaves from Brussels all the way to Tehran. We're talking about the European Union's move to label Iran's powerful Revolutionary Guard a terrorist organization. And let me tell you, this was so much more than just a political statement. It's a move that has kicked off some massive geopolitical tremors.
And it all really kicked off with powerful statements just like this one. You can really hear the justification in it, can't you? A top EU official framing this as a direct, necessary response to repression. This wasn't just quiet diplomacy. This was the opening shot in a major international confrontation. So, what exactly happened here? Well, after some really intense debate, the European Union made a decision that was both unanimous and, frankly, historic.
Here are the hard facts. Every single one of the 27 member states agreed to put Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, the IRGC, on their official terrorist list. Now, their reasoning was twofold: the IRGC's brutal role in crushing protests back home and its aggression abroad. And this is a huge deal because it puts the IRGC in the exact same category as groups like ISIL and Al-Qaeda. I mean, that's a massive political statement, and it comes with very, very real consequences.
And this is what those consequences look like in practice. The goal here is pretty simple: to choke off the IRGC's financial lifelines. So any money or assets they have in Europe, frozen. Any of their members want to travel to the EU, banned. And maybe most importantly, it's now flat out illegal for anyone in the EU, a person, a company, anyone, to send them money or resources. The idea is to completely disrupt their entire operational network.
Okay, so to really get the weight of this decision, you have to understand what the IRGC actually is. Because let me be clear, this is not your standard run-of-the-mill military force, not even close.
You have to go back to the 1979 revolution. The IRGC was created with one single-minded mission: protect the new clerical regime at any and all costs. But, over the decades, that mission has just ballooned, giving the IRGC immense, sprawling power over pretty much every aspect of Iranian life: military, political, and economic. So, you can think of the IRGC as having two very distinct faces. At home, it's the regime's iron fist, the force that crushes protests and, by the way, controls a massive economic empire. But then abroad, it's the engine of Iran's foreign policy. We're talking about funding proxy groups like Hezbollah, running the entire missile program, and guarding key nuclear sites. This dual role, part internal police, part external power player, is exactly why the EU's designation is so incredibly significant and so controversial. As you can probably guess, a move this big triggered an immediate and totally polarized reaction. For opponents of the Iranian government, this was a moment of victory. For Tehran, it was a declaration of war. So let's start with the Iranian opposition. Maryam Rajavi of the NCRI called it a long overdue move against the regime's brutality. You have to remember, groups like hers have been fighting for this for decades. So for them, this felt like a major break from what they've always called a Western policy of appeasement. But Iran's government? They saw it in a completely different light. The foreign minister basically accused the EU of hypocrisy, of fanning the flames of conflict. Their argument was that Europe was just blindly following US and Israeli policy while totally ignoring other problems in the region. And this contrast just lays it bare. You have two completely irreconcilable realities. On one side, it's a necessary, just stand against repression. On the other, it's an illegal, hostile attack on a sovereign nation's military. I mean, there is absolutely no common ground here. But, and this is key, Iran's response didn't just stop at angry words. So let's get into Iran's countermove, because this is where things escalated into a direct and pretty dangerous diplomatic clash, a real tit-for-tat exchange. And the speed of this escalation was just breathtaking. Look at this. Just 2 days after the EU's decision, Iran's parliament fires back, declaring the armies of all EU member states to be terrorist groups. And to really drive the point home, lawmakers showed up to work wearing the IRGC uniforms in solidarity. Germany immediately dismissed it as baseless propaganda, but honestly, the damage was already done. We are now in a situation of mutual terrorist designations. And this brings us to the really scary part, the wider implications. Because this diplomatic fight isn't happening in a vacuum. It's unfolding on top of existing military and nuclear tensions that, frankly, are already at a boiling point. So what happens now? That's the billion-dollar question, right? With diplomatic channels essentially frozen solid, what are the biggest risks? Well, analysts are pointing to several flashpoints where this whole thing could escalate into something far, far more dangerous. See, this political move is now creating very real, very tangible security risks. We're seeing Iran conducting naval drills right in the Strait of Hormuz. That's a vital artery for the world's oil supply. At the same time, there are reports they're hardening their nuclear sites, building them deeper underground to protect them. With diplomacy totally stalled and the regime facing intense internal pressure, the entire situation is just incredibly volatile.
And that leaves us with this fundamental, critical question. Was this a decisive step towards security, or a diplomatic gamble that just pushes everyone closer to conflict? Supporters will tell you the EU's designation was a necessary moral and strategic line in the sand. But critics warn that it's backed Iran into a corner, making negotiation impossible and dramatically raising the risk of a much wider, more devastating conflict. And right now, the answer to that question remains dangerously unclear.